So today I want to talk about working remotely, how we do it at Arkency. And there's those crazy times right now, everyone is working remotely. So I thought it would be a good idea to share some experiences of how we do it at Arkency, given that we have around 15 years of experience in working remotely as teams, as software programmers. But I think that only some of the ideas here are quite generic and can work to any profession. In the normal times we work remotely and we work asynchronously. Nowadays it seems like everyone is working remotely, so there is like almost nothing to compare with, especially companies like software companies. There's this interesting idea of how well it works. Everyone's learning how to work remotely. For some of us it's very new, and even if someone is more experienced, the other team members, they might be not that experienced, so it might be a bit difficult for some of the people. So my plan for today is to talk about some very some useful technique how to organize the work in a project, assuming there's a team of at least 2 people, and assuming the people work they're working from homes, for example, and there might be situations where they don't work at the same time. So this is the big difference between how to work asynchronously and remotely. I usually focus on this difference, that remote means that people work in different places, while asynchronous, it means that we work at different times. Sometimes it might be that 6 of our hours overlap, but sometimes it means there is bigger difference. And I think especially nowadays in this difficult situation, we don't often have this luxury of working 6 hours straight. Some of us stay at home with kids. Some of us have to do some other important work, which means we can't really work straight 6 hours. So maybe it's more like you can work 2 hours, then you have to make a 1 hour break, and then you can still again work for 2 hours, then again 1 hour break. So this is a new situations, which means, for example, that it's not so easy to just set up a call. It's not so easy to set up a camera and just talk to your coworkers, and people can be interrupted, people can be disconnected. The internet connection is not so perfect nowadays because everyone is online now. So this is more difficult. So the first idea I want to talk about, and I will be using some notes here from our book, is that it's more important that we have smaller tasks for our projects, especially given that people are less available or less productive nowadays. It means that if you have one person assigned to a certain work, and this work requires, I don't know, like 2 weeks of work, and they will suddenly be less available for whatever reason, they need to help their family or something like that, then you are risking that the project will be blocked on this specific task. So there's this concept of trying to splitting this all the tasks into the smallest possible, we call them tickets. So the tickets of size 1, or if you work with stories, you can use the stories of size 1. And size 1 is it's a very abstract meaning. It means probably somewhere around 1 or 2 days of work for one thing, and it makes the work more transparent, more efficient if you see the flow of how people are working. So during 1 week you can expect one developer to finish 1, 2, or 3 tickets. So there is this feeling of closure. You can feel that you have done something in a relatively short time. And there are many techniques how to split tickets into smaller ones. Let me know if you would like to hear more about that. But assuming you can do it, it creates a situation where there's this flow of work being done. And especially in remote environment and async environments, it's really important because this creates this impression that everything is going well, despite the difficult times. In many programming teams, there is this concept of sprints, where a sprint is, or an iteration, it's like 1 week long or 2 weeks long, and then you try to have this start of the sprint, and then you have the end of the sprint, and the sprint or the iteration is giving some scope. So there's some agreement that we will do this and this number of tickets available. I believe it's more efficient, especially in a remote environment, to work to slowly forget about this idea and instead go to the concept of a stream of work. So instead of thinking about what can be done in 1 week, we just focus on organizing the work that needs to be done, and someone else, I don't know, it might be project managers or product owners, or maybe it's developers doing this. We need to organize the tickets somewhere in the backlog, and maybe after 10 tickets there's this line that this is expected to be done within a week. But so the project managers, they do need to think in terms of the calendar. They need to think about the times. But from the perspective of developers, it doesn't really change that much. So while project managers can still think about the dates and timelines, we as developers don't need to focus so much on those starting the sprint and ending the sprint. As developers, we can just focus on whatever ticket is to be done. Then we can just take it, finish it, and once we finish, we take the next one. So this is a stream of work from the perspective of developers. The concept here is important because it also creates, there's less meetings involved, less synchronization, less calls, and during this remote work collaboration, this is a bit more difficult to set up those calls, or they are of less quality, and it's a bit more difficult. There is a concept which we call Chronos versus Kairos, and I usually forget which one is which, but I think Chronos is it's basically a way of thinking about time. So as developers, we always have backlogs, which are there is always too much work than we can handle, and this is normal, this is natural, and this is not only normal for developers. In every company there's a situation that there is more ideas, more work than people can handle within in the next week or month. And this is important from the psychological perspective and from the motivational point of view, that we can be more motivated when we don't think that there is like so much work. Instead, we think in terms of the time boxes. So especially with this situation now that we have this interrupted flow of work, so we can work 2 hours, then we have a break, then we have another 2 hours. It means that we can think in terms of, okay, I have 2 hours available, or today I will have 3 blocks of time, 2 hours each, and that's what is available for me. What's the best I can do for our project to move on? So that's like a bit of a mind shift of how we perceive time in our projects. And for each of such blocks of time or slots of time, you think how you can, deliver something useful, deliver something important, which brings us to the next point, which is the concept of the backlog, and the backlog sorted in a way that you always take the first available ticket. So when I'm a developer and I'm working on a project, and let's say yesterday I've had a 3-hour session available for me and for the project, then what I do is I take whatever is the ticket is at the first one. It's put there because it's important according to the product owner, and what I do is I try to finish this, or I try to understand this, and maybe I'll try to do as much as about this ticket in this 3 hours window that I have. And maybe I will need to finish this on Monday with another 3-hour window. Maybe it's a small ticket that I will be able to finish from start to finish in 3 hours. And then I will just take it, grab it, I will assign it to myself, and that's the way it will be done. This requires something that is not common in all the companies, which means that all developers are capable of doing all the tasks. And this brings more questions which are more detailed, and we can handle them at some other point, at some other moment. Like, for example, if you have front-end and back-end split, what's the best situation for developers, how to split the backlog? We do mostly web development or API development, so we prefer that our developers are full stack, which means one ticket basically means something functional for the client, for the users. So it's always a finished and a full unit of work. Another thing that is useful, and it was useful and is useful at Arkency, is that while we often have dedicated project managers from the client side, our developers are capable of doing the project management work on our own, which means we have enough knowledge from the business side of knowing what is important, what's the vision, what's currently what are the priorities. So we can jump onto the backlog, or we can jump to the specification, and we can cut the tickets and move them to backlog, so we can organize the backlog basically. And we can do it in a way that is then useful for others. So I'm not only organizing the work for the next ticket. When I start a project management session, I will make sure I will prepare at least 5 tickets, so that other people, they don't have to change their context or switch their context to the project management role. So they will just do they will just take the next ticket. What it means is that usually in our backlog we have this situation where there is like 10 tickets at the top of the backlog which are sorted and prioritized. There is this separation line there at the 11th position, for example, and then there's a bunch of random other ideas or tickets, which means that this separation is the border between what is available for people, what is already prioritized, and what is not prioritized yet. I will just make sure, because I don't see anything, too much information here. How it is, what's the quality already? Okay. Customers meetings, that's another point, like how we organize the situation where we have a meeting with a customer is required, or in this situation with remote collaboration, this is a call with a client where we agree maybe on the next work which is needs to be done. So while I try to avoid the calls when it's possible, certain meetings and calls are needed. Usually the business people are not so used to the async way of working, so they are not huge fans of writing things down and explaining themselves in writing. That would be more useful for developers. But sometimes it can be our work that we jump on a call with the business people, and then what we do is we put it in writing what they say. We agree that this is more or less our understanding what we do. We help them, we brainstorm with them, we tell them more or less what's difficult, what's not. So without going into estimates, we say this is easy, this is difficult, because we have technical depth in this area. And we try to summarize all those meetings in terms of some documentation or some kind of notes, and then everyone else can see that. Often we also record such meetings. It's usually a waste of time to watch all of them for those of the people who were not there. But what is possible is that other people can review the notes later, so that's usually enough. So when we as developers work closely with our clients, and during the calls we make some notes, or we make a specification of what needs to be done. This specification sometimes becomes part of the backlog, and we create a ticket which is called a specification ticket. So a specification ticket is, if you use Trello or Jira or Pivotal Tracker or something like that, it's just a ticket which is not yet ready to be worked on directly, because from such specification ticket you are starting to extract actual tickets. So if you know what's most important, you find the MVP of this ticket, and then you extract the first story behind the first scenario behind the MVP, and then you move the specification ticket down, or you extract more of them. So that's the project management work that I mentioned earlier, where we extract the work from the specification, more or less. So that's the project management work. There is this concept of okay, so once you work with tickets, you might need to communicate, you might need to ask more questions, so then you just add comments to those tickets, so this is obvious. and everyone else can see that. We also have some integrations that whenever you add some comments to Trello or to our backlogs, then on Slack we also see that. So some of the communication, sometimes the technical communication is happening on Slack, and sometimes when it's more like business-oriented communication, then it's part of the backlog. When you work remotely, it's really important that we are over communicating, and over communication is probably the hardest thing to do for us developers, because we tend to be more introverted, and we don't even programmers have this rule, don't repeat yourself, and we sometimes apply it to the real world communication as well. Over communication means that you when you write a commit message, for example, right? So you have git commit, and then you explain what you have done, so other people can see it through the git commits. But then you go to Trello, for example, and then you add a comment to summarize what you have done. And in a way, this is already a duplication of those information in Git. In a way, it's not really the same. So this is over communication. So you go to Trello and you add a comment there. Maybe you write on Slack that you've been working on this ticket. Maybe you have a stand-up channel. So we have the stand-up channel for summarizing what was done recently or what is planned to be done. And then other people can see just a summary. So the stand-up channel is just a summary of what was done. So over communication means that also if you see some kind of problems, something that's related to the area where you work, you don't keep it to yourself, but you try to over communicate it to others. And you might have some special Slack channels or something for this. So we have a special Slack channel for all the for each of the our projects. And people can skip it, but at least they have a chance to see and read it. Stand-ups and meetings. So I've mentioned stand-ups. We don't do daily stand-ups at Arkency. Because daily stand-ups, that's the technique of which make sense in offices environment, at least more sense than in remote, which means that we all start at the same time. If you can have this discipline as a team, if you have this luxury of starting at the same time, then a stand-up, a kick-off meeting for each day might be a good idea. But if you work more asynchronously, people start slightly in different times. Someone starts at 8, someone starts at 9, someone starts at 12. Then it's not so easy to enforce the same moment for a stand-up. So stand-ups, they don't make sense. Some companies enforce daily stand-ups on Slack channels before you start work. This might be a good idea. But as I said, in async collaboration, sometimes it's not thinking in terms of days of work. It's more like the session of work. So you would need to have a stand-up of what you have done during a session of work. So it's more of focus on what's my current session, what I need to do, what can be done later. So our stand-ups are more async. So like when I finish 2 days or 3 days of work, sometimes just communicating on stand-ups every 3 days is enough. Sometimes it might be that I will write twice during a day on the stand-up channel. There's a huge topic which I'm not sure if there are some questions about that, but I'm not sure how to go into detail about how to organize your office at home. Sorry, this is a huge topic. As you can see, just part of my home office. This is a separated office from other parts of my house. I have this luxury of having this, but this was an evolution. So right now I'm isolated from other parts of my family. I have kids, but they don't disturb me at this office. So this is a rule. In other places, obviously, you can create some separated rooms. You can create some. You can use headphones to isolate yourself. And I think this is also quite an interesting moment of time for many of us who work remotely during this difficult time, the lockdown. People can't leave their homes, which means that almost every one of us is working together with their partners, wives, husbands, kids from the same apartment, which makes it more and more difficult to actually have a useful call, a useful meeting when you're on camera or even when you're on microphone, because there is always some noise around you. and you can't expect it to be, without it. And I think everyone is now empathetic to this situation. So I believe that, focusing on those techniques that I just mentioned today is useful, because they reduce the need for calls, and they reduce the need of for such, importance of the calls. The calls are still fine. The result of such techniques, as I described, is that usually you have actually better communication than in many teams or office-based teams. It's just different. It's more in writing. It's more in asynchronous. You have to be more disciplined. That's, if someone asks you a question, I think it's useful to have some kind of a, I don't know, what's your favorite tool, Nozbe or Todoist, some kind of a tool where you write down or mark it as something that you will do later. So asking a question in async environment is a bit different. When you are the one asking a question, you can't expect that someone will reply right now. It might be that they are not there because they are not physically available in front of the computer, or they are there but it's more important for them to focus on their current task than to reply to you. So just be respectful and let the other people decide when they reply to you. And this is different than in the office, when you can just go to someone and just clap the shoulder and interrupt their work. So here in async environment, we are caring about our lack of interruption, and the deep work is required. Which leads to a typical problem in such teams. Like sometimes you may feel like you are working in such a team and you feel that maybe you are ignored, and because you ask some questions and it seems like no one is replying and you don't know what to do exactly. So I think it's difficult, but you need to learn that, how to do it. But also from time to time you need to review how the communication in the team is going. So if someone feels frustrated because he or she feels ignored, or that the questions are not answered, then maybe we need to review our techniques. This is important. It doesn't have to be answered immediately, so you can't expect immediate answer. But if the question is more or less valid, you should get an answer from someone from your team. It might be other developers, might be project manager. So there needs to be a situation or clear expectations of how we handle such situations. We don't want to be constantly interrupted, and the whole remote work situation enables that. At the same time, we do need to respect that others might be waiting for questions to us. But it's also important that in a healthy situation, there will be the number of questions between team members will be reduced, because more and more information you have. We have this rule that everyone has access to everything. So everyone has access to the specification. Everyone can review all the wireframes, and all the documents are there. So it's always worth thinking. It's not that you want to disallow questions, but each question brings this idea. Okay, why those people might be blocked, right? So, but obviously, if it's just a question for can someone review my changes, then that's a different sort of questions, and hopefully in a good team you will get help from someone. Okay, I think that's enough for today. I was using this Async Remote book, which we published 4 years ago, but I think it's still valid. And we are explaining, for example, the specification ticket as a floating ticket idea. So we have some diagrams, and I've been using those ideas from this book. So I'm planning to do some more live videos like that. If you watched it after I've been recording this, let me know if there are any specific questions you would like to ask. And if so, I will try to cover them in the next videos. And as for today, if no questions are here, and I don't think any question is there, that's it from me. Thank you for watching, thank you for attention, and see you the next time, and good luck in those difficult times.